Hi guys, and welcome to Gadget First. Today we've got the full review of Apple's iPhone 5. So firstly, let's talk about the price of the iPhone. For the 16GB model, you'll be looking at £529 for a SIM-free unlocked phone, and that goes up to $699 for the 64GB. So quite a hefty sum of money you're going to have to pay to get these unlocked. However, they do start at around the £35 mark on contract. But you do have to hunt around for a good deal on contract, as a lot of people only start selling them for free at about £47, which is a bit excessive. But you know, if you're earning quite a bit, you know, that's not really going to be too much of an obstacle. But let's take a look at the iPhone itself. On the front, Apple have changed the 3.5-inch display to one that is now a 4-inch, and they've increased the resolution so that it's the exact same pixel density, so it's still classed as a Retina display. The width of the device, of the screen, hasn't changed at all, but the height has, which means you get quite an elongated looking phone. Slightly odd looking when you first see it, although when I was using it I did get used to it fairly quickly. It wasn't too much of an obstacle, but it's definitely a little harder to get to the four corners of the display now, due to that. And especially if you've got small hands, it can be quite hard to get all the way up there. You can see the difference between the two types of displays when I show you the Nexus 4 here. I'll just turn the brightness up on this. It seems to be on auto, which is actually quite low. So you can see just how much wider the Nexus 4 screen is compared to the iPhone 5. But you know, it's not necessarily a bad thing. So let's go on to some of the external features. So the iPhone 5 has a rearranged front. You now have the front-facing camera in the centre rather than on the right-hand side there. You have the speaker here and the sensor there. On the left-hand side we have the volume buttons. Not a standard rocker as we see on most phones, but two separate buttons. And there's also a switch here to switch between silent and loud. So fairly useful. On the right hand side there's nothing but the SIM tray, which has to be removed with a pin, and that is the new nano SIM, even smaller than micro SIM. So very, very small SIM card. On the bottom, you get a focus? Yep. On the bottom we have the Thunderbolt, I get confused with them, the Lightning port, which is the new port for Apple devices, usually across all their devices, such as the iPads, iPods and iPhones now. To be fair, it's a bit of a weird move for Apple, because it renders a lot of accessories completely incompatible, and those that are compatible will need adapters, so you know, it's not a smart move, I don't think. And there's no real benefits with it, not those that will really make a big change to the phone. We have one speaker. Despite this deceptive look, there is only one speaker here, and this is the microphone instead. And we have the headphone jack here. I do wish other manufacturers would take Apple's lead here and put the headphone jacks on the bottom. It just makes so much more sense having the headphone jack on the bottom, because it's easier to get in and out of the pocket. It just works better. Right then, so on top there's nothing but the power key, or unlock key, however you see it. So that's it for the front. On the back we have an 8-megapixel camera with flash, and there's also a noise cancelling microphone here for when you're on the phone call, or when you're in phone call, sorry. This basically acts as a noise cancellation mic to get rid of background noise, making your calls more clear. Like I said, you've got the aluminium back, which is swapped out from the old iPhone 4 and 4S's glass back, which is a welcome change, to be fair. The glass back broke far too easily on the old iPhones, so it's a welcome change to see something a bit more solid. I can't really make out whether this is plastic or glass here. It certainly feels like plastic, but a user did point out that it was glass, but I'm really not sure. So I'll just leave that there. I won't pass judgment on that. So let's take a little look at the software on board. This is currently running iOS 6, the latest iOS. As all Apple devices do get pretty much the latest updates, give or take a new feature. So a relatively straightforward looking home screen. You may notice that there's an extra row of apps due to the increased height, and Apple has been trying to get developers to incorporate the added height of the iPhone 5's display, but there's not many apps that I've found which do make good use of it. Some just scale up exactly how you'd see them on the old iPhones. So then let's take a look at just how fast things run on the iPhone 5. Going between pages seems nice and fluid, if not slightly less fluid than Android 4.2 on the Nexus 4, but you know, I'm not complaining, it seems pretty smooth. I'm currently using Chrome, but Safari, the built-in browser, is brilliant. If we just go into Safari, if I can find it, there it is. Right, that's a ruined voice search there, don't worry about that. So let's go on to my favourite, is the BBC website. Seems to be a relatively hard site to do, and if a phone can do that, it can pretty much do any website. So as you can see, scrolling through everything seems nice and snappy. Pinching to zoom, you know, it barely has to think about it, it just works, really. So browsing is absolutely brilliant on the iPhone 5. It has the largest array of apps you can get on any mobile device. Android is catching up, it's literally only a few thousand apps behind Apple now, but as far as quality of the apps are concerned, Apple has a slight advantage. But one thing I don't like about the new App Store is it just seems harder to find apps now, because it doesn't present you with a list. Instead, it presents you with a card-like interface when you search for an app. So you have to go through each one individually, which just seems like an absolute waste of time. There's certainly better ways of doing it. Just having a list with the app's icons is far, far more efficient than this. So it's a bit of a downgrade from how it was before. But I'm not complaining, as the range of apps is brilliant. Now onto the camera. And just focus. There we go. No, there we go. A pretty comprehensive camera. You've got a fairly simple interface, but it does have some settings if you dig down a bit. So you just tap this to take a photo, and you can also touch to focus anywhere on the screen. Now you've got options for flash here, automatic, on or off. So there's an option to do a grid, which will help you line up your photos. Not sure if you can quite see that. Yeah, there you go, these lines which make a grid on the display. And there's also an option for HDR, which I find is a bit of a false effect. It doesn't actually take multiple photos, I found. It does just add an effect. So it's not real HDR as such, but it does look like HDR unless you're really nitpicking. And the panorama on the iPhone is different to that you might find on other phones. Sony did this years ago on their Android phones, and it has been incorporated into standard Android since, before the actual iPhone had it. But it does work pretty damn well. You just press the button and you continuously move the iPhone in a single direction. It will warn you if you're going too fast or if you're out of line or anything. So now, basically takes no time to render at all. Seems really, really fast, and there you have it. That's not the whole panorama. It does do a lot more than that. but you can see there. Stitching, well, it's not actually stitching because it's a continuous photo, but the way it is put together, you can see here, it's not the best. I can see quite a few problems. So not the best, but you know, it's not too bad. There's not too much else in the camera either. There's pretty much nothing else, but it's everything that you probably need to use. And there's also obviously the front-facing camera, which is remarkably good. Hello. Certainly the most clear camera I've seen on a phone, front-facing camera that is. And the colours are really good as well, especially if I take my Nexus and put that on the front-facing camera, and then put that on the front-facing camera. There's definitely a big difference. The colours actually on the Nexus are pretty good, but the iPhone 5 just trumps it massively. So now let's look at some of the built-in apps. So we have the clock, which is basically hasn't changed. A lot of these apps haven't changed, to be fair, but the big thing was Apple Maps. They've got rid of YouTube and Google Maps, and they've now replaced it with their own Apple Maps. Although they haven't added a replacement for Google Maps, which is a bit foolish of Apple, I think, because so many people use YouTube. But the good thing with it is that the apps that Apple provided were a bit crap, to be fair. So now that lets Google do their own apps for YouTube. Right then, so as you can see, performance is really smooth with Apple Maps, and I can zoom in, and it's all really smooth, and you can get quite a bit of detail on the maps. You can pull this up and you can do lots of stuff, changing the type of view, dropping pins and such. And the impressive part of this is that if you go to a big city such as New York, and go into 3D mode, you need to zoom in a bit, and then go into 3D mode. I think I need to go on to that. There we go. Turn on the buildings. You can see it's just loading a bit, but you do get proper 3D models of important things in the landscape, which is really cool. So you can see the bridge here, and everything that is like fairly important is modelled really realistically. So nice addition with Apple Maps. But on the whole, Google Maps is a lot better, a bit more polished, and it's a bit of a shame that Apple just chucked away Google Maps. Call quality on the iPhone 5 is pretty damn good, to be fair. The speaker here makes quite a loud noise, and the voice is, you can definitely hear quite a bit of tone in it. It's not just doesn't make the person you're talking to sound robotic in any way. But the microphone, I found that people did sometimes complain that it wasn't the clearest. So you know, call quality is not great on both ends, but certainly when you're listening to people, it's really brilliant. When it comes to battery life, the iPhone 5 doesn't really excel, but nor does it disappoint. It will quite easily last the day with moderate usage, but if you're trying to play games loads, you know, it's going to struggle to get through the day. It's certainly not quite up there with the iPhone 4, but it's probably like on par with the iPhone 4S when it comes to battery life. So it's certainly not a bad battery. For me, on the whole, the iPhone 5 is definitely an improvement on the 4S. Everything seems a little bit more snappy and fast, and there's certainly a speed improvement. But when it comes to whether it's worth the price or whether it's worth an upgrade over the 4S, I'd certainly say no. The 4S is more comfortable to hold, probably has slightly better battery, and is a lot cheaper at the moment because this is out now. So the previous generation of iPhones goes down in price quite a bit, making the iPhone 4S even better value than this. So really, I can't recommend the phone that much, but certainly if you're wanting to upgrade from a 3GS or even an iPhone 4, it's probably quite an upgrade. But keep your eye out for other phones such as the Nexus 4, which in my opinion trumps it in most ways. I'll have a comparison video on these two phones at a later date. But certainly if you're wanting an upgrade from a 3GS or an iPhone 4 or a cheap Android phone, then the iPhone 5 is definitely a good